Welcome to the -1 session of the Cypher Solo Fantasy campaign that I am posting as part of Promised Monkey Presents. This is going to be, at least at the start, an irregular series of solo Cypher system games. I'm going to start with this -1 session, developing the campaign world using a system I'll describe in a moment. This will be followed by session 0, probably in 3 parts, as I create 3 characters using the new Cypher playtest rules and to illustrate how that works, what the changes are, and to show you some kind of exciting new developments in Cypher system coming with the new Cypher transition. I apologize for those who might have seen the announcement a few minutes early. I new to the streaming thing, and so I had to figure out how to reattach my stream key. But no reason to get into the details, and I think it has worked out now. So, welcome. My name is Scott Robinson. I am a college professor as a day job, but my major hobby is RPGs and really has been for quite a long time. I've been playing for decades at this point, and I just fell in love with Cypher System soon after, or actually before the release of Numenera, and have been playing a lot since then. You may have bumped into me if you've attended Gen Con or Gamehole Con. I've run a lot of games for MCG those locations. Also, I formerly co-hosted the Incantations podcast, an Invisible Sun podcast that ran for about 100 episodes, ending right about the emergence of COVID, synchronicity or whatever that may be. I was also the co-editor of Cypher Crafter for the last few issues. But otherwise, I've just been sort of bouncing around in the community, more lurking than anything else on the CU and other social media sites and the like. But I decided to go ahead and take the plunge and to start streaming. So the Cypher Solo will be me going through a solo campaign using the Mythic GM emulator. But the big premiere is actually going to be tomorrow night, Thursday, January 8th, when Promise Monkey Presents the Cypher Crafter starts, when we have a panel of people, including myself, to talk about how to create pieces for your own Cypher and Cypher system games. So this is really just a lead up to that, and will, after the premiere tomorrow night, Cypher Solo is going to proceed irregularly in parallel to the weekly Cypher Crafter show. But let me jump right in and waste no more time. Session 1, or session -1, is a concept I borrow from some books I read over the winter break by Jonah and Tristan Fischel. They look a little bit like this: the collaborative campaign design and proactive role playing. And I'll refer to these, especially in these first few weeks, because I've really been impressed by the systems suggested in these books. These are mostly system neutral books about how to engage players in world building. So it's not just a GM telling a story with occasional dice rolls, but instead the world itself is the product of the imaginations of both the players and of the GM. Now with Solo, I'm doing all of that, so it won't be quite as collaborative, but I think some of the processes are still useful. So I want to start with 2 thank yous. The main screen you might see is actually the a page from a Notion database that is set up, and I'll just put all my material in here so you can see what I'm creating and what I'm typing as I go along. This template, though, comes from Mike Shea, the Lazy DM. So I want to thank him for the template that I've used in Notion, but also direct you to his Lazy DM books. I find his Lazy DM books, though mostly focused on 5e or other systems, they're not Cypher specific. They are excellent advice for improvisational DMing and GMing, so that you de-emphasize the amount of work you have in prep and instead focus your attention where it's needed most to create fun at your table. So I recommend checking those out. The other two books I mentioned are by John and Tristan Fishel, the GM's Handbook of Proactive Role Playing and the GM's Handbook of Collaborative Campaign Building. I found these at the Half Price Bookstore. They've been at like every Half Price bookstore I've gone to over the break, which is probably 3 or 4. So apparently they're in circulation and relatively easy to find, and very good advice. It's not that it's necessarily a lot of material I haven't seen elsewhere, but it is collected in a lot of ways, or collected from a lot of sources, and condensed and presented well in an easily digestible format. So instead of telling people, "Oh, you need to go read this blog from 2005 and this blog from 2015 and this blog series from 2017," and having to collect all this information, of this emerging notion of collaborative gameplay has really become more popular in tabletop RPGs. This collects a lot of that advice, repackages it with attribution, and then advocates for processes for engaging players more in world building and in role playing. But again, it's not going to be very obvious in my solo sessions. But this first will be a solo world building session to illustrate what you would do in such a process if you did have all of your players around the table. The first step in the session -1 system is to generate a genre statement for your campaign. This basically narrows down what could be a limitless number of options for Cypher System. In Cypher System, you could play 1920s horror, you could play science fiction, fantasy, you could play like caveman sort of campaigns. All of that would work with Cypher System. So you need to narrow down what you're doing before you can even have a productive conversation among players and the GM about the campaign. And it starts with this very simple and open statement. The open statement for the campaign I will be building for the solo role-playing exercise is a fantasy world on the precipice of a magical industrial revolution. So we already specified it's fantasy, but it also adds this little twist of what makes it different than other worlds than Dragonlance or Forgotten Realms or any of those various settings. It's one where the entire world is about to change, and it's about to change because there will be more magic and more regularized scalable magic than has ever been the case before. It's not just the weird wizard in the tower who does strange things. Instead, there will be mass production of magical materials and magical items and the like. And I am interested in playing out what that transition might look like. The second stage in a session -1, they call campaign inspiration. Usually you would go around the table and ask all the players in turn to either add a statement about the campaign. You could add an example of a movie or a comic book or a novel that you think is the sort of material you want to play. And you just kind of take turns for a few rounds around the table to really bounce ideas off of each other. Instead of having a table full of people, I just did this myself, but they illustrate how you might add or layer these inspiration. So, building on our genre statement, I added that I want to investigate the operations of colonialism and the resistance of indigenous people to this colonialism. It's part of what's my more kind of intellectual interests, but also interests in the hobby, about how much our basic fantasy campaigns are predicated on colonialist assumptions about colonial superiority and the like, and the indifference to the pain of displacement and murder of indigenous peoples. So I want to kind of investigate that through my game, and specifically how my characters might come to realize they're part of this colonial system, and how they instead might serve to assist and protect in the indigenous people they find. Another layer for this campaign is think of it in terms of a gold rush for magical materials in a remote area. This is almost D&D, but in the Wild West. That doesn't mean necessarily cowboys and six-shooters, but it's in a relatively unregulated space, invading indigenous land in order to extract resources that are valuable to the colonial power. And so I want to kind of again use that as a setting that amps up the conflict and provides some obvious inspiration for what adventures might look like. So just like a Gold Rush, Wild West sort of story, you might have the equivalent of train robberies. You might have what happens in a Gold Rush town when a town becomes very rich rapidly because of the discovery of these magical materials. And those are the sorts of conflicts and questions that really interest me for the campaign. A third inspiration I'm frankly not as likely to lean into, at least for this first campaign, is also that I wanted to consider a world in which divine magic is rumored to be returning after it had been absent for a century or more. So this is a world where divine magic has not been a reliable basis for healing and magic and the like. Most people believe the gods have left. They've abandoned the world. Though there are some rumors that the gods are returning. In my very cynical world, this is not actually the gods returning. There's more. It's more complicated than that. But I don't want to give away too much of the deep lore, nor bore you with it just yet. In addition to these sorts of statements, you can also just identify again inspirational media, and I think of this mostly in terms of tone. And so the tone I'm going for with the campaign is like the Brendan Fraser version of The Mummy, pulp action, um, punching bad guys, chasing down the evils that are unleashed by, opening up the mummy's tomb or the like. But particularly that sort of fun action pulp feel is one of the tones I'm going for. Another slight variation on this, I thought, as a tonal inspiration, is Firefly. Here you have again kind of it's operating out in an unregulated space. There is a powerful sort of controlling government or something along those lines. Here would be the colonial power. But as in Firefly, they are the good guys. They have their own nefarious interests, and some people are good who work for the government, some who are not. And so the skepticism of authority that's built into Firefly is also an inspiration I want to draw into this campaign. So after you've gone around the table and picked up some of these different inspirations, you move to the creation of factions. I'm going to skip a couple of the steps because we're going to get to them a little later in the way I'm doing session 0 and beyond. So instead, I'm going to focus mostly on the creation of patrons and factions. It's useful to think of the world in terms of factions because it allows you first to understand the world as one in which things will develop and evolve with or without the intervention of the PCs. So it creates a living world that is changing beyond the direct adventures of the player characters. But it also provides the first step in identifying conflict that'll be the basis of the adventures themselves and the encounters themselves. Where are people disagreeing? Where is there likely conflict? Because that's going to be you can't punch a mummy until there's a conflict between the mummy and Brendan Fraser. You can't I think some of the genre or the inspirational statements imply where some of these conflicts are between the extractive intentions of the colonial power and the resistance of indigenous peoples in the land and the like. So kind of encoding these into the world based on factions is a way to make living indicators of these sources of conflict. In this world, I decided to create two sets of guilds. One group I'm calling the public guilds. Again, I want to kind of play with some things I don't see as often, but wanted to include in my own game. So my first is a Gearmongers Guild. So this implies the existence of clockwork technology in the world. It may not be of an industrial scale, but that's part of the transformation that I want to kind of live through in this campaign. Parallel to the Gearmongers Guild, there's a publicly acknowledged College of Magic. It mostly focuses on evocation magic, and they are one of the primary drivers in the pursuit of this magical resource that we'll be encountering and developing during the campaign. I also wanted a public Porters Guild. This is the because we're talking about the extraction and shipping of a valuable resource, the people who do the shipping are powerful. This is sort of the East India Company that is both shipping and, frankly, illegally smuggling at times. And so, but I think having that guild creates a faction with interests that may then create the conflicts that I'm looking for, because they'll be aggressively pursuing this extraction, and they'll be the ones on the ground that are literally pulling the resource out of the ground. And from their in the indigenous lands, they'll be the ones that are likely trying to drive off and often kill the indigenous peoples where they find these resources. So we already have some sense of what might be one of the major villain organizations in the setting. I also wanted to have some more secretive guilds that not everyone even knows exist. One is starting off fairly generic, the Cartel, which is a thieves guild that has emerged parallel to the Porters Guild. The Porters Guild is the publicly known shipping and transport guild. The Cartel is all of the obscure illegal activities that are going to emerge in parallel to the colonial extraction of the Porters Guild. Another of the quiet guilds is not necessarily invisible. People may know about it. It's called the Dispatch. And this is the people who are sent into new lands, newly discovered continents, and the like, to explore them. They're also kind of like the prospectors in the gold rush. And in a geopolitical sense, they're the rumor mongers. So they sell not just maps, but really all because they have people all over the world exploring new places. They have the best information about what's going on in this new wild continent. And I'm going to have the players start out as members of the Dispatch. They will be explorers, and will very quickly discover this magical resource and get caught up in the gold rush around that, and then start to see the operations of the cartel illegally operating, the Porters Guild, and the things that they do to acquire more of these resources, and how politically salient this is. That the information about where these pockets of resources are, how to negotiate with people to extract those resources. The Dispatch will become a very important player, but the players will discover they are not. They are a morally dubious player at best. Um, the last of the quiet guilds, again, that exists but is not well known, is the Wandering Legion, a series of a group that provides mercenaries for hire. I imagine this world in which nation states, kings, and consuls are not really the major political powers. They are puppets. That these guilds are the ones that actually run most of the world, and the nominal political powers are actually not all that important. In part because the armies of these worlds are really unable to overturn the status quo when the major military power is this free floating series of mercenaries. And anyone can win a war if they just have enough resources to buy the mercenaries. So in the end, the decisions of the Wandering Legion as to where they send mercenaries determines the outcomes of these wars. So in the end, who's really deciding the outcome? It's the guild, not the kings or the dukes, or the consuls or the like. The last faction I want to talk about are the indigenous people of this new continent. I'm calling them the Lost Peoples because they are thought to be extinct. They are thought to be rumors, and they represent different. Instead of having like historical analogs, which gets into real problems of cultural appropriation, I want to have these first be clearly non-human, like bird folk and reptile folk and bear folk and wolf folk, but they have been, for reasons that will be revealed through lore, have been sort of fragmented and lost in this continent. So had been rumors of their existence, but probably most people didn't believe they existed anymore. And now, as the Porters Guild and the College of Magic and others, sails up to this new continent, they think it is more or less unoccupied, and they're just going to come in and extract all these resources when they encounter these mythological entities that are inconveniently resisting their extraction of resources from their own indigenous lands by a colonial power. So the player characters are going to discover these lost peoples, and over the arc of the campaign, learn how to assist them and serve as allies in the resistance of colonial powers on behalf of these lost peoples. And one of the balances I know I'm going to have to seek very carefully is how to discuss the indigenous resistance to colonial extraction, um, without it looking like some sort of blindside story about the nice human person who's helping these indigenous people, and they're the humans are the powerful ones, and they're gonna protect the lost peoples. I really want to avoid that and discuss the development of the power, the internal power of these lost peoples. That's something I'm really going to have to be careful about to avoid not just tropes, but harmful tropes about powerlessness among indigenous peoples. So that's not what I want to reinforce. Instead, I want to reinforce the capability and the potential for connected communities of indigenous peoples and of these lost peoples. But that gives you a sense of where the campaign is going. Uh, and this is the sort of exercise you would go through at your table. So again, to review, you'd come up with a short genre statement. You would then take turns and add campaign inspiration, whether they're characteristics of the campaign or their tonal inspiration from media. And then you would build more specific manifestations of these inspirations in the form of factions, where the conflict of the campaign will emerge from the incompatible goals of the Porters Guild and the College of Magic wanting to extract this magical resource from the lost peoples, the indigenous populations of this new continent. Well, this is just the beginning. I want to thank you for your patience. I hope this session -1 gives you ideas on how you can involve your players in campaign creation, and not just character creation, but really building the entire world, because that helps all of the players buy into the campaign, have stakes in the campaign, and thereby enjoy the campaign. But thank you again, and I look forward to providing more of these sessions irregularly over the next couple weeks as we get to the actual play of the campaign after we create characters. So I'll end the stream now. And just watch out for and subscribe to Project. I'm sorry, Promised Monkey Presents to see when I will pop up irregularly, and especially watch out for our Thursday night sessions, 10:30 Central Time, where we will have the Promised Monkey Presents Cypher Crafter starting just tomorrow night. Well, everyone, have a safe and happy evening, and I look forward to the next